My question deals with your sort of narratives of fragmented bodies and outside, and I'm wondering from what angles you approach that.
The Minotaur. Bowie uses the Minotaur in Outside. So, how does he use it? Why does he use it? What is the function the Minotaur is serving?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's very interesting. I think, and I'll also use the pronunciation Minotaur, right? I think the British pronunciation is Minotaur,
Yeah.
and it's King Minos or King Minos, and then it's the Minotaur, the Minotaur. So we'll just say Minotaur. Bowie, firstly, the full name of the character in Bowie's One Outside, for those of you tuning in who those people who might be tuning in who are not sure what is One Outside. It's an album that Bowie published officially in 1995, and it was a collaboration with various members, obviously band members, but amongst whom featured Brian Eno, and he also produced it. And it's a quite an experimental piece, right? And this piece of music was really, in some sense, the first album since Diamond Dogs in 1974 that was like fully like featured. Oh, well, not just characters. The Thin White Duke came after that, but it's a kind of story that goes um, with the music. So the album really benefits from a full listen through from start to finish. However, what was confusing for people is the fact that it's a non-linear gothic hypercycle drama. And
Right.
John and I, this is not the first time we've spoken, certainly not the first, I don't know how many times, five, six, even maybe, with those mini things we did talking about the Leon sessions of 1994. But I'll stay on track with the Minotaur, what it represents in Outside. So the Outside hypercycle, if we can call it that, this kind of nonlinear storyline. And of course, it's songs and it's music and it's segs, and I'll get back to that. Um, the Minotaur, is a character amongst many, but what distinguishes, I think, Minotaur is firstly the actual name is artist slash Minotaur, not just Minotaur,
Yeah.
right? So it's the artist slash Minotaur. Now, why does Bowie call this character the artist slash Minotaur? Who or what is the artist slash Minotaur in One Outside? And how is that different from like the Minotaur of Greek mythology, the Minotaur in the Labyrinth? And I'm not sure how much detail to go into there because I don't want to spend too much time in the Greek myths, which is a bit different. But Bowie, I think, firstly, around 93, 94, 95, Bowie was very interested in this character. And Picasso, did
Yes.
renditions of Minotaur. And
I was
Bowie was
gonna
very
add,
much,
if you didn't bring it up, I was gonna ask you
yes,
about Picasso. So yeah.
absolutely. And, many artists have done sort of depictions of Minotaur. Now, how
So
is
let me just stop you because we mentioned Picasso without explaining that, but I think that it's relevant to just because Bowie was particularly
Yes,
interested in art at always, but at that time in
right,
1995, there's an
yes.
artistic theme to the album. And what did Picasso do with the Minotaur? And also, you know, on the off chance that nobody knows what we're talking about, what is a Minotaur?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Well, yeah, and that goes back to the Greek mythology and
yeah,
the myth of the Minotaur. So you have King Minos or Minos, Minotaur,
yeah.
right? I said earlier. And so there's the whole Greek myth behind this. I want to make the short version here. So because I tend to, right, I'll go on and
Yeah.
on. It'll take a half hour. We won't even talk about outside of the anything. So it's a bull-headed. Uh, you know what it reminds me, like in India. Sorry if this seems like I'm going off topic, but I'm not really. You have an elephant-headed boy
Yeah.
in Indian, right? One of the deities, one of the gods, one of the deities, the son of Shiva, the blue-skinned god, is a boy with like an elephant head and a boy's body. It's got sort of a pot belly. Now, the Minotaur well, grows into a man. Actually, the story is that Poseidon, in order to punish King Minos or Minos for his pride, and he didn't want to sacrifice this magical kind of bull, um, to Poseidon, and he kind of tried to trick Poseidon and like sacrificed a regular bull, thinking Poseidon's not going to figure it out, which of course the god's going to figure
Yeah.
out, you know. And so Poseidon's like, okay, got it. So, you know, you care more about, you fell in love with this kind of like magical, you know, creature, this incredible creature, rather than keeping your word. So rather than punishing you, King Minos or Minos directly, I'm going to do it indirectly. And the story goes that like this, again, how much relevance does this have to Bowie? I'm trying to get to, but
Well,
just quickly,
yeah.
very quickly say. So what happened is, because I've said this much, I was actually kind of reviewing this earlier, you know, thinking about the myth itself, going back to that, and then talk about Picasso and Bowie. So, so it's a bull-headed, born as a boy to punish the king. Poseidon makes the wife falls in love with this incredible bull creature, and she goes to Daedalus and says, you know, can you help me out? And Daedalus builds this like fake wooden bull that she gets inside of, and she's impregnated by this kind of magical bull creature, and the child she gives birth to is a bull-headed boy. And the problem is, in the myth, that the boy grows up to be this beast with a man's body and a bull's head.
Yeah.
And it's the problem is, right, it's not tame. It's animalian.
Yeah. And
So
Picasso
then,
depicts this image repeatedly in some of his art.
right, and I'm gonna talk about that, and I'm also
Yeah.
gonna connect to Bowie and that, and then why also I chose the figure,
Yeah.
which goes back to 2022, 2023, 2020. We talked about those albums and the
Yeah.
Minotaur,
Yeah.
Minotaur. But anyway, so okay, so it's born and it grows up, and the king is like, what the heck am I going to do? Right? Because,
Yeah.
like, firstly, you know, the wife's impregnated. Secondly, I got this bullheaded, now a man that is a beast, and it only wants to eat people. It won't eat, you know, steak or something. It won't eat McDonald's. Okay, it won't eat hamburgers, American hamburgers or Greek hamburgers or anything. I'm making bad jokes. It wants to eat people. It's a beast, and it will only eat flesh, you know. So he's like, well, okay, so freaks out. So okay, we'll get Daedalus, who is like a kind of architect. I don't think Through These Architects' Eyes has anything to do with that, and builds the labyrinth. And so the Minotaur is trapped there. And then the story goes later that this other, you know, they have to send 7 boys and 7 girls. And I'm going to tell this story because it is kind of in a weird way relevant to my version. It's
Yeah.
kind of strange, but it ended up being sort of relevant, and I'll explain that later. 7 girls, 7 boys, 7 girls. One version I read said every year, but typically it's once every 9 years. I think those numbers have some significance, maybe not to outside, to be eaten by the Minotaur. They're sacrifices. Now, this is important, I think, to Picasso, but especially to Bowie, the idea of sacrifice. Because, right, ritual sacrifice of
Yeah.
Baby Grace Blue
Yeah.
in One Outside.
Another
It is
character in the album.
ritualistic, and I'll talk about, yes, sacrifice. Now, how much detail do I go into of Bowie's outside and analysis of that with 1 hour to talk about also my version and the adaptations? But
Yeah.
quickly to say, yeah, Baby Grace Blue. So let me give a quick. So we have artist Minotaur, and I'll get back to why it's maybe in Bowie's version. Why I think it's artist. What's artistic about eating people?
Yeah.
Well,
Before we get to that, Mark, though,
okay.
I think
Yeah.
there's a
You
simple,
guys,
I think a
go
simple
ahead.
point about Picasso, and
Yeah.
I do think it's relevant because, I mean, you could disagree with this, and please do if you do disagree. I think Picasso is using the image to depict the tension between the animalistic impulse and the rational impulse, because
Right.
it is part animal and part human. And as you're explaining with the Greek story,
Yeah.
this creature that has the body of a human is an insatiable wild beast, right? And I think
That's
Picasso was playing with that.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I Bowie's immersed in art at that time, but throughout his whole career, and not just with the Minotaur on One Outside, he depicts creatures that are partially human or partially one thing and partially something else.
Oh, yeah.
Right. the the cover of Diamond Dogs, right? Or
That's it.
yeah,
It's time that's and that again connects them in another way
yeah,
because like I made mention earlier, right, that it's the first fully fledged concept album. I didn't use that word before. It's
yeah.
the first fully fledged concept album since Diamond Dogs.
Diamond Dogs, yeah,
And this is not just me saying, David Bowie said in some interviews and things that there was a connection, that it was an updated version, kind of like the Hunger City thing. It's not Orwell, obviously, like Diamond Dog's a B-side, but the Diamond Dog, okay, like there's also that famous photograph of Bowie with the dog that's kind of standing. It's like
yes,
bigger than he is.
yes,
And also, I'm going to say it, okay, because actually it's quite important. I'm going to talk about Bowie and art too, before even getting to, right, the versions that I've done and so on. But like, so the dog on the cover of Diamond Dogs, when you open it up, what made mommy and daddy so horrified was to see Bowie's full body,
yeah,
the lower half, which was eventually it kind of like that behind you with the face smushed out. They smushed out the genitalia
yeah, yeah,
of the dog, even though it was a dog's genitalia,
yes,
not
yeah,
humans. You remember what they did to Tin Machine 2? They did
yeah.
this
Same
the
thing. Yeah,
same thing with the, and I think Bowie maybe joked about like the second time the genitalia were like wiped from my cover or something. And the Minotaur now, and I don't have the CD on in actually I could have pulled it out, but I put it away. I don't have time to look for it right now. But like if anyone's seen, and I can edit the image into this, the Minotaur is shown like on the CD, the hands, the red hands.
yeah,
Genitalia are not shown, right?
yeah,
Like the Diamond Dog shows the genitalia. But I want to say something about, there's a reason I'm talking about this. The Minotaur Animalian, Picasso Animalian, Diamond Dog's Animalian, and part of that is the sexual impulse. Now, why do I mention this? Why is this important? Not just about genitalia, but Bowie in 94, I believe, I think it might have been 93, 94, and I should have checked my notes before the interview again, but I talked about this actually. I did a talk on my page, sitting in my room with the camera, just doing a talk where I was reading and talking about the Minotaur. There's actually, if anyone wants more details about the Minotaur, I say different things about it on that talk. I did an hour plus talk that's on my YouTube page that can be, it's on the figure of Minotaur slash artist or artist Minotaur. So I'm not going to talk about all those things. But anyway, what I do want to say briefly is that Bowie did a series of prints, and he also did a cover for somebody's book. And the name was like Takeoff on de Sade, like Marquis de Sade, right? Sade is sadism, sadism. The sadism's named after Marquis de Sade. It was something I forget. I don't have my notes with me, but it's Devad or something. It was some like a parody of that. And Bowie did the cover, and it's the Minotaur or the Minotaur. And then he did a series of Minotaur or Minotaur, like drawings. And one of them has the Minotaurs crouched down, and the hands. What I was reading is like it was interpreted they were Bowie's hands. So Bowie was like somehow putting himself in the character of the Minotaur.
So something unusual about the Minotaur character, there's many characters on the album One Outside, but the Minotaur does not get his own segue. So
That's right.
what is that about?
Yeah. Actually, that's one thing that, and I think I mentioned this in an earlier talk with you, and you asked me why the Minotaur, because the first album I did in the
Yeah,
series, right, going back, and the first seg I did features the voice of the Minotaur.
yeah.
What would the Minotaur sound like? And I use this right effector on my voice to make him or this beastly thing sound beastly.
My name is Minotaur. Or rather, I am the one who has been seeking for body parts in Oxford Town, New Jersey, all these years.
And I didn't actually ham it up that much. I kind of used like a very, like quiet spoken voice with this really low voice. Bowie does not do this at all.
Yeah.
And so actually, however, it's unless you're a kind of really an addict like I am, and have like sort of like gone through the story a bazillion times and looked at the booklet and a bazillion times. If you look at what, if one looks at the booklet that came in the CD, and this is like 1995, now people listening on online are not going to get this unless they go and look it up, but or the AI is going to tell them or something. But like the songs are assigned to characters on the One Outside album. And so you have like the segs are obvious, right? Because it's like Baby Grace is speaking, it's her horrid cassette, or
Yeah.
Algeria Touch Shriek's seg, or Nathan Adler, the detective seg. But because the Minotaur doesn't have a voice or a seg, it's like, well, where is the Minotaur, the Minotaur? And one other thing I would mention is like, you had interviewed Jennifer Elster, who dressed Bowie up in these costumes to make him the characters. He even plays Baby Grace, a 14-year-old girl, which he
Yeah.
doesn't look at the age he was like 48 at the time. A 48-year-old man doesn't look like a 14-year-old girl, but he has the long hair wig, and he's like right like this, like looking, I'm the victim. And then that was also digitized later by another artist, different from the photographer. But anyway, the Minotaur, what I want to say here is Jennifer Elster did not dress David Bowie up as the Minotaur. My understanding, and I've read some things on this, is that was not part of it. In fact, there was another, like a kind of actually apparently, and I didn't know this until recently, guy, like a kind of buffed up guy who was filmed, and they used a bull's head for him, and then maybe manipulated it slightly for the cover, the jacket, and the hands. So Bowie does not, what I'm saying here is that Bowie like does not dress as the Minotaur inside of the booklet. Bowie does not speak as the Minotaur on a seg, but the songs I'm Deranged and No Control are assigned to the Minotaur. Now, sorry. I made a mistake. I'm Deranged and Wishful Beginnings. Now, No Control is for Nathan Adler. Now, actually, that's an interesting thing, because Nathan Adler says, I've no control, it's all deranged. And the Minotaur sings, I'm deranged. It's the Angel Man. There's a story
Yeah.
behind the Angel Man, too. He was one of these people at the Guggen Institute, which is Bowie and Eno visited in 94. But that's a whole other story. But anyway, so there's some connection that Bowie is drawing between, I think, the detective Nathan Adler and the Animalian Minotaur, but the Minotaur does not speak. However, the Minotaur is assigned to I'm Deranged, so it's that madness, and Wishful Beginnings, which is sorry, little girl, baby, I had to kill you. So there is why is the Minotaur important? What makes the Minotaur so central is this. The Minotaur is obviously the murderer. However, the Minotaur is not a person, it's a Greek mythological figure. So who and what is the Minotaur? Now, to me, the Minotaur is the central character and also the most mysterious. We don't hear the Minotaur's voice. We don't
Yeah.
have a seg. Bowie does not dress as the Minotaur, but he dresses as every other character in the book and does
Yeah.
the voices. So he's separating, he's distancing himself from this character, yet the character is on the CD with the red hands. And going back to what I was saying earlier, is that Bowie did drawings of the Minotaur previous to the album being released, and one of them had the hands of his own hands. And
Yeah.
going back to the sexuality and Animalian, and I'm going to say this, anyone who's interested can go online and look this up and see these online, which is where I saw them. I haven't seen the originals. I think the V&A, has stuff like this you can go see. Bowie depicts so the Minotaur, one is he's down on his kind of haunches with the hands, human hands and human body.
Yeah.
But like the Diamond Dogs cover, you can see, the genitalia. And in another one, I'm just going to say this, I don't think this is going to be edited out. It's not pornographic, but like Bowie depicts the Minotaur like standing like a human, right? Like the human body, right? Down on the haunches is like an animal, like a beast. But Bowie does one where this Minotaur's standing and he's holding his beep in his hand. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, that's not in the outside booklet. I think the label would have been very unhappy with that. They were already so unhappy with him about so many things. We're not going to talk about Leon and how he couldn't release that. So that was too much. But like, if you go and look at what Bowie did in this book, which I haven't read it, but it's like if it's riffing on Marquis de Sade, the French
Yeah.
guy, sadism named after his, he was a philosopher. Okay. His book's very philosophical, but they're like, it's like Caligula's holding a party and he's like riffing off like really deep philosophical things about good and evil. Okay. Or L'autre amant or something like, not everyone's going to know. I won't go into the French, and the existential writings, which comes later and all this. L'autre amant is another 19th century, like this kind of, or Huysmans and Labat, and the people who know French literature in 19th century will know these titles, but I won't go into. Bowie would have been familiar with these things. But anyway, so the Minotaur, where actually I think most of this talk is right, but the Minotaur is a central figure, I think, in Outside. By the way, just very quickly, if anyone's familiar with Leon, which preceded Outside, which we've talked about several times, so I'll just add it in, the 1994 sessions that were originally going to be released before the label said make songs that we can do singles, which became Outside. And the longer character voices were condensed to these little tiny segs that are like a minute or something, or a minute and a half. Baby Grace really reduced. Algeria Touch Freak really reduced. They're on the Leon sessions that the 70 minutes that one can find online is the Leon suites. But the Minotaur, what I want to say is that there's no Minotaur voice, right? So there's no Minotaur on Leon. At least not in those 70 minutes. Like, there's no trace of Minotaur. Since there's no Minotaur voice, and there are no notes, and there are no songs assigned to characters like to be sung by the Minotaur is absent from Leon, but the Minotaur is central to the Nathan Adler, and also the Nathan Adler Diaries, which describes this story that he wrote for Q Magazine
Yeah.
before. The murder of Baby Grace Blue, and it has all the other things. How much do we want to talk about the Outside tale?
Yeah, we
That's
got
gonna be a
it.
whole
Yeah.
thing. But what I want to say, just let me finish this and I'll let you ask your next question. The Minotaur, really, there's no trace of the Minotaur there either. It talks about all these, like the German, outsider artists who like cut themselves and did performance art, and the wrapping the eyes with the fish that Bowie does as the acolyte.
Yeah.
All these things have references, and they're referred to in the Nathan Adler Diaries, which is in the booklet, and that's part of the non-linear Gothic hypercycle that confused the hell out of people because and then they listen to the music, and then they have the segs, and they're like, I can't connect anything. But the Minotaur is on the CD. The Minotaur is assigned to 2 songs, right? And one last thing quickly, anyone who's seen the first video for the first single, which is like probably one of the least commercial songs on the entire album, which is The Heart's Filthy Lesson, I mean, could he have picked a less commercial, less, accessible song to start off the whole thing with? And in the video, which you've seen, I'm assuming, right, by Samuel Bayer, which has the Minotaur in it. They're reconstructing the Minotaur. They have it's not a human body because that would have been too grotesque. There's like a dummy, right? And Bowie is seen singing with the head upside down. He's smoking his cigarette. And there are all these quick cuts. Samuel Bayer, who directed Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit, directed the video. And so they're rebuilding the Minotaur. The bull's head, they put it on the mannequin's body. The head is then removed. And they put the Minotaur's head on. And that's the Heart's Filthy Lesson. He's referencing Ramona, Patty, and other characters, but the Minotaur is smack in the middle of that video, which tells the audience, yes, the Minotaur is important to this tale.
So let me ask you this, and then I'm going to ask you
stop.
one other question relevant to Bowie's use of the Minotaur, but that I think will open the door for you to talk about your Minotaur.
Absolutely.
So
a lot to talk about here.
Yeah. So the as concisely as you could say,
Yes, I'll do my best.
why, right? So you talked about his use of this character in the video, in the story, in the songs. The character does not appear visually. Why? What is he using the Minotaur?
Right. Well, I mean, the very succinct answer is what you already said.
Yeah.
If I go into it, it's going to be like the whole talk. I won't do that. But there's a lot to say about why Bowie, I think, chose that. Right. We had a quick mention of Picasso. Bowie was interested. I think he bought like a Picasso Minotaur or something. Like he's kind of
Yeah.
obsessed with it. Like I say, he did a series of prints. He did the cover for this book. And you answered that in a sense early on. You said, right, the animalian, the animal in us. Now,
Yeah.
I asked the question, which I haven't yet answered my own question, which I'll attempt to do in answer to this. The art, why is it artist Minotaur? And that might help to answer the question in outside.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The artist.
Yeah.
And Bowie at that time, as you say, firstly, artist could be visual artist. That blurred thing behind was Bowie's head.
Yeah. Not
The head
really,
of,
but it's, it's
no, what was it? It's the yeah. So anyway, that was, by the way, it was supposed to be a different cover apparently, and then the label said no, and then like he ended up doing this. It was his self-portrait that like the dead head of Bowie kind of thing. It's like a kind of anyway. So right, so he's painting, right? So art. Also, by the way, the Heart's Filthy Lesson video looks like a studio, right? Bowie's seen painting, he's got paint on his face and stuff. It's a mess. And all the people, they're tattooed, they're piercing, they're recreating the Minotaur, right? They're all, it's a kind of chaotic thing. There's also religious imagery there. It looks like the Last Supper at the end with the long table. But the artists, not commercial artists going, let's dance, let's make a pop song, which Bowie was coming out of that after Tin Machine and smashing his own image to pieces. He was coming out full force saying kind of F you
yeah.
in a way to that whole thing with outside, because like his, I think his, even notwithstanding that he had to revise it after the label rejected the Leon sessions, which were even more FU experimental. But, it was uncompromising in many ways. I mean, the Heart's Filthy Lesson in the video and all that. So the artist, right? So Bowie is saying, what is this aspect of the artist that is chaotic, uncontrollable, animalian maybe in a way, right? So like Picasso, right? Picasso used to like throw hissy fits and like, he was like a horrible person to live with. I think he wasn't nice to women and he
Right.
was kind of a pain in the butt. I won't use the donkey word, right? Artists aren't always pleasant to be around, but I mean, Bowie was kind of a gentleman, and I mean, obviously, he might have butted heads with certain musicians and things. That's also whatever. But like artists, when they're in their, I like to use this. This is not Bowie's thing; it's my thing. In their lair, artists in their lair, like the Minotaur in his lair, making creations, creating things. And by the way, this kind of does seg into my work and my own personal feelings about this. It's that aspect. So the artist Minotaur, but the artist Minotaur is also maybe the murderer, which is, I
Yeah.
don't think Bowie is suggesting that artists are like psychopaths, but
Well, he does raise the question of, is murder art, or could it be art?
yes,
That's
well,
sort of the
that's the
central
whole, right, that's
question.
what I
Yeah.
said. Yeah, well, I mean, I could talk about all that, but that would be the talk. And actually, if you wanted to we could do another talk where I've been really
No, no.
delving.
Let me sort of refocus you to then transition into yours. So there's a word that I come across when I read about Bowie more frequently than I come across in any other context, which is the word liminal. And
Yeah.
Bowie,
Liminal.
there's a lot that Bowie experiments with that's between things. So
Yeah.
the Minotaur is between human and
Man,
animal, right? But
absolutely.
within, I'm looking down because I pulled up the lyrics to the Ramona A. Stone "I Am With Name" segue, which
Yeah,
includes this. I'm reading it so I don't get it wrong.
go ahead.
A person who loses a name feels anxiety descending, left at the crossroads between the centuries, a
That's
millennium
Nathan Adler
fetish.
speaking. Yeah,
Yeah,
Millennium Fetish. That's Nathan Adler who
right.
speaks
And
during
and
the
it's
peak.
really
Not
it's
yeah.
yeah, I mean we listened to One Outside 30 years after it was released, or more than 30 years after, and we forget the context of the new millennium was just about to hit. And
Absolutely.
Ramona A. Stone makes reference to another half one thing, half another thing at one point. She talks about 8 men with metal parts.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
I think that is, and you here, correct me, but this is also the lead into you talking about the Minotaur. I think that is very relevant to
It is.
why you've made the Minotaur sort of the centerpiece of your adaptations of this work. So, am I right about that? And if so, or if not, why?
Well, the Yes and no. I mean, you're hitting on many things that you're
Yeah.
absolutely correct about in the case of my work. Actually, the fact that you mentioned Ramona, I'm glad because Ramona is also actually quite important to um, my work.
Yeah.
As like I've taken, and so is Baby Grace or Baby. I call her Baby Blue. And if you might recall, we talked about this last year's version. I did a seg. I did some of my own segs, right?
Yeah.
Last year, not this year. This year's version, which I haven't talked about yet, the Minotaur and the three, we haven't talked about yet. But I called her, I sometimes refer to her just as Ramona or Ramona A. Stone when I'm referring to her in my
Yeah.
improvised pieces from the past series. But I also created a seg, and my seg was called Ramona AI.
Yes. Yes.
So that goes back to that. But then also go back to your space about the liminal,
Yes.
right? So, I mean, obviously, right? Man and beast. The crossroads between the centuries. And of course, the outside was one outside because it was supposed to lead up to the millennium.
Yeah.
And it opens with those dates and Leon taking us outside. And I have something to say about Leon here. This is Bowie, not me, my version. In Bowie's Nathan Adler seg, the first of two in the seg, where the Nathan Adler verse comes on I'm talking about the album, not Leon, the suites, on the album. And Bowie says, now Leon, he couldn't wait for 12 o'clock midnight. He jumps up on the stage with a criss machete. Do you know what a criss machete is?
I know. I do not. In
I
fact,
have a feeling most people listening to this don't either. It's
yeah,
an
I'll tell you,
Indonesian,
Mark, I thought the
I'm
lyric
gonna say,
was crisp,
crisp. So did
machete.
I
Yeah.
originally. I learned this actually fairly recently, like several months ago. Criss machete. Bowie's interested in all these esoteric. You're talking about
Yes.
liminality. That's why I'm
Yeah.
bringing this up. This is something most listeners not going to catch. Most listeners, I think many people skip over the segs, right? Some people just don't like them. I just want to hear the songs, right? Just give me strangers when we meet and finish it. The criss machete is an Indonesian, like my flute, which actually this is a great lead into this. So this is an Indonesian flute, which has nothing to do with the criss machete, but I want to talk about this later. It's an Indonesian bamboo flute, but it's an Indonesian kind of knife, and it's
Yeah.
kind of a curved knife like this. It's very sharp and it's curved. It's used in these kind of ritualistic things. It's got a kind of magical property. It's used in a ritual, the ritual murder of baby Grace.
Yeah.
Ritual, and we were talking about, right, this aspect, the ritual of recreating the Minotaur, like in Heart's Filthy Lesson. I haven't talked about all the back, why the piercings and the tattoos. As the millennium's coming, Bowie talks about people are obsessed with these rituals like piercing the nose, piercing the nipple, making big holes in their ears, which is like, in Africa they put the bone through the ears. And
Yeah.
you see in the mid 90s people doing this because Bowie was talking about, and that goes back to the whole thing about, right, we've lost God. Nietzsche, God is dead, which
Yeah.
of course happened, right? But then you have the Industrial Revolution. We stop believing in God. We shift to science. This is going to go a little bit into my version, actually, talking about in the themes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I pick up
I
from-
want to do that. So,
Yes,
you know,
let
one
me
of the
finish,
things.
though. The Chris machete, quickly. Let me finish that. The Chris machete that Leon holds, he says he jumps on the stage with a Chris machete. Now we know what this is. This ritual used in Indonesian, cutting he doesn't say his ear. I thought it was his ear on everything the first time. Chris machete cutting his ear on everything. No, it's a Chris machete cutting zero on everything. Cutting the zero of the fabric of time itself. How much more liminal can you get than that?
Yeah.
You're cutting a zero into the fabric of time. Then he can jump through the fabric of time. Baby Grace was murdered when he, cut the fabric of time. Now, last year, there was another Leon. If you flip the letters of Leon, can you make a new name with the four letters
Yeah.
Leon?
Yeah.
And right?
And
Anagrams?
you seized on a
Yeah.
reference in the album to brain patches.
Well, there it is.
Yeah.
Well, no. Before, well, yes, it does connect to brain patch. We talked about this last year.
Well, I
One
mean,
thing
here's
is Leon-
what I'm getting at, Mark, is
Yeah,
that
I'm going to say, I know.
well, okay, go ahead and say it.
Well, let me just say, right? Leon,
Yes.
who was accused of the murder of baby Grace, although he was likely set up for that as the fall guy. And you get more of that in the Leon sessions, actually. There's more evidence for that. If we want to talk about who did it and why, who done it and why, although it's got lots of holes in it, like the holes in the Zero Fabric of Time. But Elon,
Yeah.
I couldn't resist that one. But actually, here's the thing. I caught that later. My first seg in 22 to talk about mine, and I think that's what you're getting at, was Elias, right? We
Yes.
talked about this.
Yes.
Mouse. And here's the thing. This is a little liminal and unintentionally so, because I was actually improvising this, that my seg from 2022, we have this kind of unnamed character that I kind of create on the spot. And I met, Ramona in Shibuya, which is downtown Shibuya in Tokyo. Okay. So I'm putting it into my own setting here. It's not Oxford Town, New Jersey now, which I'm from New Jersey, ironically. But now I'm in Japan, right? So it's in Tokyo. I met Ramona, and it's not Ramona AI. It was just Ramona. Her name was Ramona. I met her at some freak show, some carnival, downtown Shibuya, I think it was. This is mine by memory. She was convinced that World War III was upon us. Elias Mouse and all of his devious doings. And then it goes on, and then it goes on. They would be required for all of us brain patches, but I'm getting ahead of myself, which I took directly from Bowie's Nathan Adler. And my idea was kind of that this character that was speaking was like his son or someone related, or his, in Japanese, his deshi, his underling, who's like younger, because Nathan Adler is either an old man or he's died, right? So Elias Mouse was connected in my brain, no pun intended or perhaps intended, with Elon Musk and Elias. Elias, interpret as you will why that name, and Mouse could be like it's on America's tortured brow that Mickey Mouse has grown up a cow. But then this is the freaky liminal part, is that like Elias Mouse comes out in place of Elon Musk. I didn't want to use the name, and this was just riffing, literally improvising. I did kind of like Bowie was doing during Leon. That's how the characters were created for Outside. It was during this long 3-hour session with the members in the studio in 1994 in Switzerland at Montreux in the studio. But anyway, so it comes out, and brain patches, which we talked about extensively, so I won't go too much, but that was in my mind, right? It was connected to the Neuralink. And the brain patch is basically in Leon, and I've actually checked this. The seg on the Outside album, the Baby Grace says, like a brain catch is what it sounds like. But on Leon, in the longer seg, she says, like a brain patch, like I've got this soul brain patch, and it's got the shakers on it with this neurotransmitter.
Yeah. So
Now
what Elon Musk with Neuralink is trying to cultivate are cyborgs, right? And
he's not trying to cultivate. He has successfully implanted these things in human brains that you can control things with your mind. And part of that I use this year. Let's talk about this year's version.
Right. I that's what I want to get to, but let me sort of focus this, because Musk's aspiration is to accelerate the evolution of the human species into something that is part human and part machine. So like Ramona herself,
like
or her reference to, well, no, right? So this is the question. So the Minotaur is animal, right? So the Minotaur represents the human impulse to give in to the animal impulse. So what is the mechanical impulse? What is the machine impulse? And I think you're addressing that in your adaptations.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
and it certainly connects with Bowie's themes of the strongman or the demagogue, or the Thin White Duke type, or the Ziggy Stardust type, or the dystopia of Diamond Dogs and the dystopia of George Orwell. I would say my version, well, firstly, Outside is a dystopia.
Yeah.
We have not only this Minotaur figure that is also the artist and is murder art in that story, as you mentioned, as a theme, because Nathan Adler is head of Art Crime Incorporated. And is Nathan Adler maybe the Minotaur? Some people say, because he sings "No Control, I'm Deranged." The Minotaur sings "I'm Deranged."
Mm-hmm.
And we could go into all the different theories and all the different reasons. And I have my own theories, which has evolved over time about who did and how and what the Minotaur represents. And is that so the animal impulse could be, say, to murder and but also to create. Okay, so we get very philosophical, or I will here for a moment. Life and death. We've talked before about yin and yang, the two duality, the two opposites being two sides of the same. So liminal is also like man and beast, man and machine. Elon Musk, man and machine. Cyborg is a man and a machine. It's integrated. Neuralink is integrating man and machine. There are others doing this, not only Elon Musk, and I don't know how much to go into. We have other characters in our own story happening right now in the news and so on that are doing or involved in this. And of course, the whole AI thing, huh? And my version, yeah, it does certainly deal, and it has been dealing from the beginning with this because it started with the brain patch, but it's gotten this year's version particularly. I haven't yet gotten into why I did it or how it came about. And I don't even know how much time do we have because actually there's so many things to talk about here. But so yes. Okay. So I remember your question. The Minotaur's animal. So the Minotaur is artist Minotaur. So the animal in us is also human. Man is always right. We eat meat,
or the human is also animal.
Well, there it is. It goes both ways, right? That's exactly. It goes both ways. But in order to, the artist is a human, is an animal, has an impulse. Now, people in outside, the whole thing is right that right, like the piercings and the tattooings, that's very tribal. And it's very like, so it's almost animal, right? Like putting a bone through your nose.
Yeah.
Right? It's tribal. It's ritualistic. Baby Grace is murdered in a ritualistic fashion and displayed in a ritualistic fashion. That goes back to people like Damien Hirst, that Bowie was interested. He's putting blocks of cow in pieces of glass and displaying it in a museum. Bowie worked with him, and later Hirst did a thing that was like a tribute to Bowie and outside. So actually there's all kinds of interesting things with that, and the Minotaur and Hirst and all these things. Okay, so the animal, the artist also has that chaotic, uncontrollable kind of wild card aspect, right? The artist, because we're not just making notes and doing everything by the book. We're just right, like cutting up your lyrics and mixing them up and then saying the heart's filthy lesson. Those three words don't go together, but we're going to put them together and we're going to leave out the apostrophe. Okay, let me get to the second part you asked me. What happens when we take, instead of man and animal, like in the Greek myth of the Minotaur, or in Bowie's 1995 reconstructing that to create a new god, kind of a new something, but actually,
like a savior machine.
But it's not, though, actually, in this case, because one thing I recognize, I've been looking in more and more and more.
Yeah.
The Minotaur, though, is not that figure, actually. That figure does exist, but it's in Leon, and it's not really an outside, because we have a second protector who's one of the small friends, which Ramona mentions. All that story is left out of the Outside album, so I can't even go into that because that's getting really, really, really. But anyway, the Minotaur, they're laughing at the Minotaur in the video. And then they just throwing food and stuff. It's, if you watch, the edits are so fast, even I didn't catch it. When I slowed it down, I took like screenshots. They're laughing. They build the Minotaur. They recreate the Minotaur with right? They're pouring this stuff and it looks like blood or milk, right? It's very ritualistic, and they're spitting stuff and food everywhere. And after they recreate the Minotaur, they laugh. They're walking around like just looking at it seriously. Then they start laughing at it. And then at the end, you have that sort of long table, and they're throwing the food, and it's chaos. And then you have this kind of Christ figure in the middle of the table with the shirt off, right? And he kind of puts his head down. And then Bowie has the mask on, takes the mask off, the animal mask, and it's me. And then he goes like this at the end, and he kind of slumps down, right? Okay, so I know I go off on these because there's so much to say, but okay, so the Minotaur, though, is not the savior of the outside thing. The Minotaur is actually like the Minotaur in the Greek myth, right? The Minotaur's in his lair, trapped, and they have to send him these children to eat them to satiate the Minotaur. And then Theseus comes and eventually kills the Minotaur. But then there's actually a sad ending to the story. The Greeks love tragedy too. So, but what happens, to go back to this then, when we have the animal in us as the metaphor already, right? We already know this, right? That we have the animal, and that to create something that's human. Now, let's talk about AI, shall we? Because AI now is creating and doing things that we thought, and in 1995 even, Bowie called the internet, it's like an alien life form. It's going to
Yeah.
change society. Jeremy Paxman, 1999. I've mentioned this again and again. It's in my
Yeah.
mind for film, which I haven't talked about yet. That is in there. And when I did it live, I also showed that clip to the audience. I haven't talked about any of this yet, but
Yeah, we're
Made a
running
machine.
out of time, so we're not
I
going to
thought
be
so.
able
This
to.
this is
But let
like
me
part one of two, I think.
let,
because
let me let
I
me
haven't even
ask you
talked about
this.
the series. Yeah.
So I could link to different manifestations of your Minotaur. So just very quickly describe what they are. And I'm saying very quickly, let people explore it for themselves because I also want to ask you what you're up to next.
Sure. Okay. Well, so really, I haven't yet spoken much about this year's Minotaur, but to say as briefly as I can, it kind of evolved into another triptych, but it's not a triptych in the sense of 23 through 25's triptych, which we talked about. Anyone can, right? People watching your page can go back and reference those talks. There are two talks, one on the Some Kind of Future 2.0 Lost Minotaurs layer. That was the first one, the beginning of 2025, early on.
Yeah.
And then later in the year, we did one which was the Bowie and Dystopia talk, which was in three parts. And at the end of it, I talked about Some Kind of Future. Now, this year, rather than having, right, the triptych was three albums between those 3 years. But this year, I realized after the fact that it created a kind of triptych again, but it's not three albums. It's one album. The album is called, actually, this is the old version. I updated it. This just says Minotaur. And this is the photo I used.
Yeah.
But the version that is now on Apple Music, it's on my Bandcamp page, which I can put links later, all those things, is actually called Minotaur / artist. I flipped artist Minotaur, emphasizing the Minotaur, although it's still the artist. And it has been from the beginning, it was Minotaur artist in my version. But the four, just to explain very quickly, like Bowie did one outside, but he never completed the trilogy. He was going to do 3 or 4 or 5 albums. There's only one. So it's one outside. Why is it one? That's why. I actually completed 3 last year, and this is the 4th. So I actually did complete a quadrilogy or whatever. So I put the number 4. The first 3 don't have numbers. So it's 4 Minotaur / artist. Now, let me just quickly talk about the album, and then I'll talk about the 2 other parts and how it connects links Minotaur. I'm speaking quickly because apparently
we're running out of time.
How much time do we have? I don't even know.
We've got 6 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll do my best. So let me very quickly and very simply say what distinguishes this from the first 3 that we talked about in detail last year. And you mentioned one thing that you mentioned that was distinctive about those albums of mine. You said they're tributes to One Outside, but they're not cover albums, and that they include these long improvisations based on themes, characters, and so on. But they're basically original creations with like occasional cover songs, right? Like there was, I'm Afraid of Americans, which was originally recorded for the Outside sessions, and things like this. Well, this year's, in contrast, is primarily, I will call them, I don't want to say covers exactly. Some of them are closer in arrangement than others to the originals. Like I think Heart's Filthy Lesson is fairly close musically in terms of arrangement, but I changed some of the lyrics and some of the things. But, and then others are quite different. Like I would say I'm Deranged uses the melody line, but it's quite different.
Funny secrets travel. But I'd start to believe if I were to breathe. These things guide the man hand. Holding his head up high, cruise with long Bondi calls me baby.
Okay, so it's primarily reinterpretations or covers, if you will, like of songs from the Outside album. So Well, here it is. It's in front of me. I can say. So the songs that I cover or rearrange for this, Heart's Filthy Lesson, I'm Deranged, No Control, those two kind of as a pair, because they both include that line about I'm deranged. Outside, I did a remix of the version I did last year. I put a different version, slightly different. The Enemy is Fragile, which comes from Leon. That's actually not from Outside, but it's like a song fragment that I wanted to do that I reference on some kind of future. I did a kind of bona fide, if you will, but very different arrangement of that.
Hello, Leon. Would you like something really fishy? A Solanible's one who eats her own words, or his own words. Eat her own words. 'Cause the enemy is fragile. The enemy is fragile. Oh, the enemy is fragile. Who is the enemy?
There's also Wishful Beginnings,
Yeah.
which is the Minotaurs, right? And I'm Deranged. Actually, both the Minotaur songs are on this, if
Yeah.
you will. We Prick You in a different version. I Have Not Been to Oxford Town, which is a kind of poppy song on Outside in a way. And that was the last one I did, and I decided to do it, and I kind of hammed it up, and it's a very different arrangement. It's very original. And I sing, I have not been to Epstein Town. So, okay, that's all I'll say about that. I think that's obvious enough. People can go listen to that. There's videos for all these, by the way. I also did video versions of all these, which will lead into my talk about the live version and the Minotaur film. And just a couple more here. The Motel, again, I remixed. Hollow Space Boy I had done for another album, but I hadn't put it on the first triptych. I put it on an original album. I did a new version. It's a different version, different recording, new vocal. That also has a video. It's like the new version of Hollow Space Boy. And then there's an opening kind of intro I created, an original song called Space Boy's Return from 2018 that I remixed my original version. Original vocals on there from 2018, but I remixed, put it on. It's a very outside-ish song, a tribute to Bowie after he died. And then the final track is actually from the live show, which this segs into that. And it's an improv, which includes parts of my Minotaur suites from my earlier work, and it's in a new arrangement. I play the electric violin. Okay, very quickly.
So very quickly, because we're literally running out of time, and I think the best thing for me to do would be to include links to the live show in the show description, so
Well, that's
people
fine.
can check that.
I was
check
hoping to
that
talk
out.
a bit
Yeah.
more about, but that's, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, but we're how?
we're gonna have to cut.
Let's wrap
How
up.
much time is it?
We've
Let me
got
just
2
quickly
minutes.
say, I created a Minotaur film documentary, which again I won't talk in detail, but we can include a link or something, which is an hour and a half plus film, which actually goes into both Bowie's construction of Outside and has my own take on it, and it
Yeah.
includes, for example, footage of the Neuralink being created in the lab and people using it. You can actually monkeys, and it's really okay. So, and it's also got my music in it, my videos, my own original work, but it links to Bowie, like a hyperlink, like a hypercycle,
Yeah.
links to Bowie's versions in various ways. I do the covers or my versions of the songs, Bowie's images, interviews with Bowie, bit from Paxman talking about the internet. And then I actually very quickly will say I created that as it was a side product of wanting to create video backing, including these little segs with Bowie talking and things with the themes for a live show. And then I did the live show on my birthday, 53, in Fukuoka, Japan, which is where I lived for 8 years before, at a live house. I had a 2-hour live show. The first half, over an hour, was Minotaur Live, and I premiered the whole thing. You actually shared that on your blog.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that was, much of that was created, became the Minotaur film, but the film is also different. And the live part is obviously me performing live songs, segs, and etc. And this guy, just very quickly at the end here, because I prepared it, I play this electric violin, I play this Indonesian bamboo flute, I use this kind of noise synth effector. I use these unusual things, but I also sing, mainly play the keyboard. I use backing tracks, backing video, which were created for the film. And then those songs,
Yeah.
many of them on the Minotaur album and some of them from earlier releases, but they're all outside related.